At Skift, we cover travel by looking at how its different parts, airlines, hotels, tourism, intersect and evolve. We've long focused on strategy, tech, and marketing. Now we're adding another layer, climate. This is GreenShift, a podcast about how travel is responding to the climate crisis with real stories from across the industry. I'm Darin Graham, a climate reporter at Skift, and this week, airlines. Decarbonising air travel is one of the biggest challenges facing the travel industry right now, and the world. Most countries view aviation as essential infrastructure. And let's face it, where would the travel and tourism sector be without flying? Airlines have pledged to cut their greenhouse gas emissions and reach net zero by 2050, but progress has been slow, and emissions across the sector continue to rise. The solutions on the table aren't scaling fast enough, and many people are asking why. Even the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, which represents most major airlines, recently warned that the 2050 net zero target might need to be pushed back. So what's going on? Will airlines meet the 2050 goal? How is the aviation industry actually reducing emissions?
If the airline industry doesn't decarbonize the way other industries are decarbonizing, we will become a huge part of the global footprint of greenhouse gas emissions.
To help unpick this, I spoke to Amelia DeLuca, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Delta Airlines. Delta operates more than 5,400 flights a day, making it one of the largest carriers in the world, and Amelia is leading its strategy to reach the 2050 goal. Working in sustainability at an airline sounds like a very interesting but challenging role. What motivated you to take this on, and how are you finding it?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a dream job, and I'm in a dream industry, so can't ask for more. Sustainability has already always been a really important part of my life at home. We practice quite a bit of sustainable practices and how my husband and I live. And then I'm now, over the last number of years, I'm also now a mother of two girls. And so when I think about, what I can do every day for them, it's amazing to be able to do something via my work that, contributes to their future well-being, that kind of, I guess, tries to get this whole decarbonizing aviation thing started so that they can enjoy travel in the same ways that I've really enjoyed travel.
Would you mind just explaining, when it comes to climate change and sustainability, how is Delta thinking about it right now? What are the goals, and how is it going?
Well, it's certainly a journey. We often talk about sustainability for the airline industry like a marathon where we are constantly testing, learning, iterating, but we're moving forward, and we're so proud of the work that we've done as Delta as well as the work that the industry is doing. We aim to be net zero by 2050, both Delta as well as the industry. And what that means is that, we've got a comprehensive plan that's looking at a number of items, both things that exist today and things that are imagined in the future to help take our emissions profile and walk it close to zero by 2050. And in order to do this, we are really set out to prove that sustainability is not only good for the planet, that's a known, but it's also really good for Delta's people, Delta's customers, and our overall business. And so when we think about reaching net zero, there's things that are more long term, like revolutionary fleet or new types of cleaner fuels. But there's also a lot of things that we can do today on the fuel efficiency side to both save on jet fuel, which impacts our bottom line positively today, as well as reduces our emissions or makes us less carbon intensive today. And so we are most probably proud this year of the fact that we achieved our first fuel burn savings milestone of reducing our fuel burn by 1% or 45 million gallons from operational improvements. And so when we think about long term, sure, there's new forms of flying, new airplane airframes that need to come into place, new fuels, but there's a lot that we can do today as Delta, and we're really proud of what we've done to achieve those goals so
What does
far.
it mean exactly, the fuel burn efficiency? What does that mean? So just burning less fuel on a flight?
So what it means is that, we within a group of senior leaders at Delta called Carbon Council, they're senior vice presidents and above across all of our operational units. We came together at the beginning of 2022 and said, we aim to save at least 10 million gallons of jet fuel every year. And that is on top of the year before in how we operate. And operation isolates things like newer fleet. It isolates things that are sometimes outside of our control, but it says if we have the ability to control it and do it better, every single year we're going to use less fuel than we would have otherwise. And so that's what we called our operational efficiencies. And that 1% fuel efficiency through the Carbon Council is something that we're just really proud of because we had committed to doing it by the end of 2025, that 1%, and we've already eclipsed that as of March of 2025.
And when it comes to emissions in aviation, often airlines use 2019 as a comparison. Is that what Delta does, and sort of why is that used? And is 2023 really the first year that gives us an idea of where we are?
We use 2019. It was, our really our last normal year. And it's just a great way to say, how are we doing going forward versus, what was our most active, our busiest year before the COVID pandemic. And so a really good way to think about it is in 2024, our capacity was up 5% versus 2019, but we actually used less jet fuel. And so it's just a good way for us to constantly kind of say, we're not doing this year over year thing where maybe you had a bad year and then the next year it got better. That when we made these commitments, for us, a lot of our sustainability commitments were made in 2021 in particular. But it just means we recognize that we have to go all the way back to 2019, which was kind of that high mark for the industry when we measure what we're doing to protect our planet. And so 2019 is the baseline for Delta as well.
It's all very well having all these goals, but Delta has more than 280 aircraft on order, showing that growth is still a priority. I wanted to know from Amelia how a business like Delta manages sustainability with growth.
So a couple things just to point out. So one, obviously the industry, Delta included, is in growth mode as we come back from the pandemic. We've seen just continued support for international travel, premium travel. And so Delta is obviously trying to serve its customers as best that we can. And so through that, you're seeing growth in international destinations and premium seats, et cetera. Our upcoming 2024 Delta Difference Report, you will see that our Scope 1 emissions are relatively flat, even though our capacity has increased. So again, that just means that we are operating more efficiently as we grow, which is our goal. And then in addition, some things that people see, which it's just a journey of sustainability, right? Some things are hard to measure. And so one of the most important things we can do as an airline is just be as transparent as possible. And so certain things like our Scope 3 emissions look like they're going up. But it's just because we're now working with our supply chain for the first time to say, hey, OEMs or airports or whatever, you name it, as part of that supply chain for Scope 2 and 3, give us the most accurate emissions that we can get. And as soon as we have those accurate emissions, we will publish those so that we can start to achieve those Scope 2 and 3 goals, which come later in our goal cycle. But really, Scope 1, those jet fuel, those are where our main targets are for at least the next decade plus.
What do you think is driving that change?
Our sustainability strategy is nested under 3 buckets at Delta. It's what we fly, how we fly, and the fuel we use. And every year we make progress against those things. So what we fly, obviously, we take new aircraft. During the pandemic, we retired a number of aircraft, and every time we take a new aircraft, it is more efficient than the aircraft it's replacing. That's business as usual. That's always happened, obviously. I think the new thing we're introducing here is the how we fly and the fuels we use. So if you start with the how we fly, that is truly the efficiency that is within Delta's control. And that is things that you can do on the ground, in the air, as well as the weight that you put on that plane to try to save jet fuel, not just today, but every single day. And so it's landing procedures. It is how we power an aircraft at the gate. It is how we work either with our internal teams and when we're doing a modification of an aircraft to try to get weight off, to every single day how we might use AI to better track consumption of beverages and then load a more appropriate amount of beverages on board. All those things add up. And then similarly, year over year, last year, we saw a threefold increase in sustainable aviation fuel. Now, that's still a really small part of our portfolio, but it's an important part that we're also using cleaner fuels and more of those cleaner fuels every year.
Threefold increase, yeah, it sounds small, but if you follow staff progress, actually that's really big, isn't it, for how the staff is going. Does Delta plan to increase its business class seating or change the cabins a bit? Some airlines are doing this. It increases the passenger emissions intensity. How do things like that line up with sort of net zero sustainability goals?
Well, I'll give 2 answers. One, as a chief sustainability officer, I am part of an airline company first and foremost, and then we practice sustainability. This is not a sustainability company that just happens to have an airline. We're an airline that has a sustainability team, and so what that means for us is this is not an or scenario for us. Sustainable or be best in class airline. It's and, right. Do all the things that Delta promises to deliver. That we're going to be safe, clean, and on time with bags. That we are going to be premium, offer a personalized experience. All those items that we promise to our customers, and we will do it in the most sustainable way possible. And so many times those things go hand in hand, actually. If you think about a product on board, we're rolling out our new paper cup right now. That paper cup is more sustainable. It's also more premium, right? Plastic is not seen as a premium product. Paper is seen as a more premium product. You just have to look at other vendors and you see that. So it's really the power of the and. And so when it comes to business class seating, it's an acknowledgement that that's part of our offering to customers. And I think we went into our sustainability journey knowing that we would be becoming an even more premium airline. And so when we made our climate commitments a number of years ago, we had modeled out that yes, we'd have a headwind. When you put more premium seats on, that does mean you have a headwind against your carbon intensity. But we knew we were going to have to overcome that. We had a plan to overcome it. And I think the benefit of that is those premium customers they're extremely aligned to sustainability. When you pull our customers and look and see who is climate conscious, who is sustainably minded, yes, we know Gen Z is right there, but our premium customers as well as our loyalty customers are just as dedicated to this sustainability mission. And I think in particular, what we see from our corporate clients who are very heavy premium is their climate goals also rely upon sustainable aviation fuel. And so what's actually really helpful is those premium customers, those premium seats actually set us up to have more win-win scenarios where not only do we have those customers supporting our initiatives, it also means that we have a stronger business, a healthier balance sheet, which allows us to reinvest that money into other technological advances in the future to be able to continue to reduce our emissions footprint.
And when it comes to investors, do they ask for Delta to have climate sustainability goals? Is this what they want to see from you? Or is it more the airline sort of saying, look, this is what we're doing?
I think our investors work alongside us to make sure that we have the right plans when it comes to climate, that we understand the risks, that we understand the solutions, and that we are, again, transparent about our progress. And so 2021, the industry, including Delta, made a number of commitments to net zero. And I would say that was in response to not just investors, but just the facts. And the facts are that if the airline industry doesn't decarbonize the way other industries are decarbonizing, we will become a huge part of the global footprint of greenhouse gas emissions. So we're 2 to 3% today, but if you think about all the other industries that are starting to decarbonize, if we did nothing, we would become just a huge percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions. And that would mean that no one would want to fly. And so our ticket to operate, our ticket for the next 100 years is to be able to stay in lockstep with the rest of the world as we advance towards net zero at 2050.
So I wanted to also ask you about decarbonization finance, because we read a lot about a shortage of investment and finance needed for things like SAF. And do you think that's right? Or are you seeing things improve or ramp up? You read things like how aviation, the margins are so tight, it'll be very tricky for airlines as a business.
Well, I certainly am always glad when I get asked this question because aviation can't afford not to decarbonize. This is a must, again, for us to be able to exist for another 100 years as Delta celebrates its 100 years today. We need to do it in a sustainable way in the future. And I think when you break down the funding, I think it's important to acknowledge that you can almost always find a win-win scenario when it comes to funding. So if you come back to that 45 million gallons of jet fuel that Delta has saved to date, that is $110 million in savings. And we have funded that through a pretty small portion of our budget. It's a lot of procedural changes. There's some technology, but the majority of our business cases that go forward in support of operational improvements, not the majority, all of them sit within the guidelines of Delta's ROI expectations. So first thing, good for business. When you get to the sustainable aviation fuel side of the house, you do sometimes have to turn to other groups to say, hey, we need some help as we start to take on this green premium, as we start to invest in the infrastructure. But again, there's win-win all around. I've already talked about corporations who have their own climate goals. So they need to be part of this or else they won't be able to conduct their business the way that they want to. And in the United States in particular, we've seen a lot of support from the states. And the states are providing a myriad of incentives. Let's take Minnesota, where we have our Minnesota Staff Hub. Why would they do that? Well, it's a win-win for them. It's a win-win for them because it's got economic development, it's got job growth, it's got security of livelihood for our farmers, for our agriculture and our rural communities. It's supporting research and development at the local universities. And so the reason why you see a governor like the governor of Minnesota supporting this is because it's good for his state. And so I think when you think about how we fund this, it's not just about the airline funding it by ourselves, but looking across our value chain and saying, how can we lift up others, not just the airline industry, but how can we lift up others as we start to create this new value chain for cleaner fuels or create these new procedures that save money today. I'll give you one other one. It's a really, really little one. But we've been talking about waste on board recently. And we've been talking about how can we, I don't know, I'll give an example. How can we better provision drinks on board so that there's less waste potentially coming off, right? And we went on and we asked some of our cleaning crew, our cabin attendants, hey, how do you feel about this waste? And they said to us, well, we hate the waste because it comes out of our profit sharing. And so again, there's just win-wins all around, no matter which stakeholder you look at. When you talk about why we need to do this and how you might fund it, there's a win-win there that just makes it so that no matter who we approach, we almost always get support.
At Delta, I don't know how much you're able to talk about this, but I just wondered in terms of like the budget, how much of it goes into decarbonization efforts? You need to buy jets anyway, and the jets are getting better. So does that count towards decarbonization fund budget?
It does. Yeah, it does. It's public record that Delta spends $4 billion a year on new aircraft, and that's certainly every new aircraft is 20+% more fuel efficient, and so that's a huge win. Otherwise, we don't disclose specifics. I will just, share again that we as the sustainability team run a dedicated budget that we use for a number of these projects. And the reason we did that was by showing that the ROIs that we're getting back are well above the Delta average. So when you attack jet fuel, which is, the number one or number two cost driver, depending upon, as the costs kind of vary of the cost of fuel, these ROIs are all well within Delta's limits and, are almost immediately funded when we find an opportunity and bring it forward. And then, as I mentioned on the aside, the biggest thing you can also do right now is to push for policy support, which in the United States, we've had a lot of success with that, and that helps us immensely.
When it comes to changing regulations, all around the world, I just wondered, as a global business, a global airline, how do you navigate the ever-changing political landscape and changing regulations?
Sure. Well, similarly, back to transparency, we do publish our climate change policy principles. So we do have a set of principles that provide our foundation for advocacy around the world. And it also ensures consistency in our position as we go. So people know what to expect when Delta shows up and it voices a position. That allows us to be able to go around the world and to have a position either by ourselves or with our trade association that is focused on what we believe are the right set of tools for decarbonizing aviation. So we are looking at harmonized policies, for example. We don't like patchwork policies. We don't like market distortions. And I think in particular, we really support incentives as the best path forward to both scale the sustainable aviation fuel market while also protecting our consumers.
Is Delta sort of experiencing, or have you picked up, more extreme weather causing more disruption? The heat is often spoken about, issues on runways because of weather. Any trends worth noting from your side that you can talk about?
We are in lockstep with the rest of the industry in navigating any changes that are going to come because of climate change. Some examples that I'll give that are a little bit more short term is that as any new airport is built, it takes into consideration, for example, flood levels, right? And that airport is obviously a shared airport amongst all carriers. And so this is one where we have to stay close. We share systems in terms of how we navigate. We work with the FAA on those items. And so we are certainly committed to working alongside the rest of the industry and identifying how things might change for us and being able to operate continuously.
As a business, you'll have risk. Does climate change come in there for future risks for the business?
It does. Yep. And again, very transparently through our Delta Difference report, we do disclose on the known climate risks as well as some of the mitigations that we're looking at. Again, I think we're well positioned with the industry right now and having good line of sight into what those risks are and being able to not only work within our company, work across the industry to shore up either the right level of support, the technological breakthroughs, the policies that are needed to help us decarbonize and manage the climate crisis.
So I wanted to move on to talk about, well, maybe a little bit more about SAF and then about some of the other solutions that Delta's working on. But do you see SAF as the key decarbonization solution in aviation right now? And you did touch on this about how it needs collaboration and policy support. If it is the most important thing, what could really unlock it now if you had a magic wand that could just get it like ramping up like how we need it to?
Gosh, if I had that answer, I mean, I guess my job would be a lot easier. No, sustainable aviation fuel is a must. It is the only thing that gets us to net zero. The solutions, if you didn't have sustainable aviation fuel, you would have to be looking only at aircraft that can fly with a zero emissions profile. And those are a long ways away. There's certainly incredible innovators that are looking at things like hydrogen propulsion, electric battery for, bigger than 5 people planes, but those are a long ways off. And so when you think about, the whole aim of the industry is to grow more, to connect more people, that includes international travel. None of those airframes, with the exception of a blended wing body, can really be thought of to be as part of the market around 2050. And even blended wing body doesn't get you to zero emissions. So anyways, bottom line, if you're operating an aircraft, even if it's a lot more efficient, it still is emitting carbon. And so that's where sustainable aviation fuel comes in to start to provide as close to a zero emissions clean fuel as possible. Gosh, there's a myriad of challenge, right? The stuff is expensive to produce. We haven't had the technological breakthrough yet that has allowed us, like a renewable diesel, to be able to be produced at a lower cost profile. That hasn't happened yet. It uses feedstocks today that do have a limit, and so the cost of it will always be capped at what that feedstock price is. And so we work with a number of research institutions. We work across the industry. It's decades away from being truly scaled. That's why we think, from our perspective, right, that what I just gave you is a little bit of the top-down approach. We think about the bottom-up approach. We think about things like our Minnesota SAF Hub, where you say, okay, how can I prove out that this can be done in the United States, that it can be done in this state, that it can be done using the feedstocks from the land of this state, and then giving good paying jobs to the people in this state. And so that's why we are a race against time to try to get those first facilities built in Minnesota. Our blending hub, which will essentially blend sustainable aviation fuel into the fuel system in Minnesota, will be coming online later on this year. So that SAF won't be produced in Minnesota, but at least shows the art of the possible, right? That SAF is on its way to Minnesota. And so for us right now, it's a bottoms up approach where, yes, there's a lot of challenges. There's some policy uncertainty in the United States. There's mandates coming in other parts of the world. That technological breakthrough to be able to scale this hasn't come through yet. There's competing feedstocks, there's competing energy needs, you name it. There's a challenge when it comes to SAF. But there's a lot of green shoots, right? Every single year we make progress. Every single year people know more about SAF, more people participate in it, and that's what we want.
And there's concern as well about there may not ever be enough feedstocks for all the SAF that's needed as well in the future.
Well, we get kind of technical, but today's SAF is using used cooking oil, which everyone can understand. There's a limit to how much used cooking oil exists. The next generation of SAF is using biomass type products, so corn waste, potentially woody biomass, exactly. So all those things, to your point, all those have a limit. So there is a future fuel that in theory could use green hydrogen and captured carbon. And then to your point, these are unlimited feedstocks, and that cost profile of that product, if you have unlimited feedstocks, is actually lower than conventional jet fuel today, but that is a long ways off.
So we need to keep just the momentum and the research and the things moving forward.
Exactly.
And just trying to unlock all the possibilities.
Got it.
And then you mentioned the blended wing body aircraft, which I've seen the pictures, and it looks amazing, like something from, I don't know, like way in the future. Can you tell me about it? Why is Delta supporting it? And how is this going to happen?
Yeah, well, Darin, you're going to regret asking me that, because I can talk about this for hours. This is one of my favorite topics. And we have been at work at this for years behind the scenes with Jet Zero. And it was purely, it's a labor of love here at Delta. And it's not just me and the sustainability team, it's people across Delta. Even before we had this partnership, we've spent hours and hours and hours with this team because we all are just so excited about the possibilities. But if anyone is listening to this and is unfamiliar, blended wing body aircraft is, some people have compared it to a nacho. So think about a triangle. And it's got more of a lifting surface, reduces its drag, and it's 50% more fuel efficient than today's aircraft, regardless of what fuel you're using. So you think about that, that's huge. If we can find a way to reduce our fuel footprint without even creating SAF by 50%, that's huge. Not to mention that it allows us the opportunity to almost redesign the entire cabin experience. If you had something that was really wide, all of a sudden you're talking about not a tube and wing, you're talking about these bays. You could do it without middle seats, dedicated overhead bin space, could board in a lot less time than we board today. It just takes these stress points from the journey. And since we're creating it from scratch, we can actually address all those pain points. And what is making us believe in it is not just because we're really excited and we think this solution needs to exist, is the fact that the Air Force is backing it as well. So the Air Force demonstrator is slated to be done in 2027. The Air Force needs this for mission readiness. And so we believe that Jet Zero is on the path to being successful at that demonstrator. And then that will be a really important step as we start to move it towards commercial viability after that.
And it's more fuel efficient because it's wider and it's more aerodynamic, I guess. I'm not an expert, so forgive me if
You and me both. I've learned a lot. I've got a lot of aerospace engineers on my team, but essentially, the entire airplane. So in today's airplanes, it's just the wings that lift you. This entire thing is like one big wing, which basically means it's a lifting surface. It wants to lift. So you can lift easier than today's tube and wing. If you think about today's tube and wing, essentially the cargo goes on the belly. That is a little bit of a drag if you think about it. So now everything is almost on one layer and kind of spread out wide, which again makes it lifting. And then because again, you're creating it from scratch, this company is looking at much lighter composite, for example, so that it's a much lighter weight aircraft. And so I think all those items are going to make it so that 50% can be achieved.
So the company would sort of develop this, and who would build it? Is it like the main manufacturers would eventually take it on? Is that the hope?
That I cannot answer. I think we just hope someone builds it. No, I think it. Obviously, the company itself is currently looking at manufacturing in the United States in itself, which is exciting. And there's only 2 OEMs today, so obviously we always welcome innovation. But who ultimately builds it, how it becomes a commercial reality, TBD. I think the most important thing is Delta, as well as many other airlines, are cheering them on, and I think that's the most important thing we can do. Okay.
Is there anything else? Is there anything important that I might have missed? I sort of feel like we need an hour per topic, like 1 hour for SAF,
Yeah,
1 hour for.
I know it.
But it's good to just get an overview of how things are going. But anything that you think
people care deeply about the aviation industry? It's a beloved industry, from employees to travelers to investors. People love this industry, and so they want to see us figure out how to decarbonize. So there's no shortage of partners and support that we can get. But there's also, to a degree, as Delta, to keep the trust of those partners, we have to show that we can do the stuff that we said we were going to do. And that's why we were really excited this year when we hit that first 1% fuel efficiency milestone, because it just shows, yes, there are harder things to come. We're going to need support from governments, corporate customers, OEMs, you name it. But we have to prove that we're going to do what we said we were going to do. And so that's fuel efficiency. But that's also, Darin, it's such a little thing, but single-use plastic is an absolutely major pain point for our customers. It's probably the top pain point from sustainability. They don't think about jet fuel. They don't know about jet fuel. They don't want to know about jet fuel. But they know that they don't use single-use plastics in their life, and they get really upset when they get on board and it's all single-use plastic. So for us, that paper cup was a trust-building activity to show, again, if we can do it in a sustainable way today, we're going to do it.
So, will airlines meet their net zero goals by 2050? Well, right now, it's really hard to say. From Amelia's answers, there doesn't seem to be any guarantees. Over the past few months, calls to delay those targets have started to surface, and the truth is, only time will tell. Maybe the picture will shift in a few more years, as the industry settles post-COVID. But then, you step back and you look at the data. One thing is clear. Airline emissions are rising, and the sector is projected to grow. Hundreds of new planes are on order, and it seems that growth still remains the top priority. Thank you for listening to GreenShift, the climate podcast from Skift. We're a brand new show, so please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for future topics around travel and climate, I'd love to hear from you. Please email me at dg@skift.com. And one quick note about our climate coverage. This podcast has been made possible through the financial support of Intrepid Travel. Their backing helps us produce high quality climate journalism. But Intrepid is not involved in any editorial decisions made by Skift. And now, a quick break. See you again after the break.